That
I figured it was going to be something lame like that.
What did you guys think?
I knew it.
I updated it with Andy's help, of course. Actually, Andy did most of the updating, but I felt like the other intro was missing some stuff. So we had to fix it up.
Yeah, it's great.
Make it a little bit better,
Your joke only applies to like 5% of our audience because everyone else only listens to the audio of this. So
well, no, that's
Justin's World instead of In the Tank podcast. But no, that's
true.
Fine. It's fine. It's a lot of effort for, not that huge of a payoff. Anyways, we're
work
talking
hours on that?
vaccine mandates in the United States, COVID authoritarianism in Australia, and some climate and energy topics at the end of the show. This is episode 312 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me, I've got Justin Haskins, who thinks that it's his show now. What are you, editorial director at the Heartland Institute? How are you, good sir?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks.
That's it? That's all you got?
I think the intro said plenty.
Jim Likely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing good. I'm a little cranky today, so get ready.
Oh, gosh. And we've got Nate Myers, who is a development coordinator here at the Heartland Institute. Nate's been a while.
How's it going? Good to be back.
Fantastic. Lean into the mic, sir. All right. Excellent. So, yeah, we've got a whole lot of stuff that we want to get to. Although, Justin, you have been pretty busy. I wasn't expecting you to be on this week. What did you have going on?
Yeah, so I just got back from Dallas. We had a really great trip. Went down to the Blaze to visit with our friend Glenn Beck and all the other people over there, and we had some great discussions about the Great Reset. I think I did like 6 media appearances in like 54 hours or something like that. So it's like a sweatshop over there. They basically make you work until you nearly die, and then they let you out. But it was a lot of fun. We had on Wednesday, I got to sit down with Glenn on the radio show, and we talked about the Great Reset. We did a lot of climate change talk. Actually, the appearance with Glenn was all about climate change. And this really incredible conversation that happened with the head of the World Economic Forum and the head of the European Central Bank, as well as some stuff with the Fed and how that all ties in with climate change. So if you're interested, go check that out. We're going to have it on the Stopping Socialism website. It's on Glenn's YouTube page right now if you don't want to wait. So really fantastic stuff. It was an awesome experience. We all missed you there, Donnie.
Yeah, what the heck, man?
Yeah, me and the guys, the security
Should
team.
have been there.
I know, we were all missing you, so.
Yeah, well, I had to stay back and, do all this work at the Heartland Institute. But hey, you were able to join us today. I thought you'd be too busy. I already filled your slot. You had to kick somebody off so that you could be on today.
I did. I actually had to pull rank and throw someone off. So
that's true.
He didn't seem very disappointed, to be totally honest. So I don't know what that says about the show, but
yeah, well, we got a lot of stuff to get into, so we should probably just jump right into it. So on Tuesday, I was looking for topics, and I was going through a bunch of different websites, and one of the websites that I went to was called The Drudge Report. You might have heard of it. And at the top of the website, there was yet another story about some book coming out and, some author of this book having something to say about Trump. And this time it was some general talking about how he was so untrusting of Trump that he was concerned that he was going to start a nuclear war with China. End of headline, right? So I was like, I rolled my eyes and moved on with my life. So then later, I was having a conversation with Justin, and he told me, kind of elaborated on that story. He was like, have you heard about this General Milley story? I was like, no, not really. So he goes on to tell me about how General Milley, supposedly concerned that Trump was going to launch nukes against China, secretly contacted some top Chinese general and told him that he would warn him if Trump was going to attack China. So after being blown away by that story, I thought, how is that not the headline on Drudge? Top general tells China he'll warn them if attack is imminent. Like, how is that not the main story? I was blown away by this. So obviously, the state of the media is a joke, and we talk about that all of the time. So let's put that aside for the moment and just kind of talk about the story. So, Jim, is there any other kind of details that you want to, put forth about this that I kind of glossed over?
No, I think you have the details pretty much hammered down. I mean, look, This is extraordinary. I know people on Twitter and other places are saying this is straight up treason or even high treason. It's certainly close to that, if not that, for sure. Look, you had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not some lieutenant colonel like Vindman, who decided that he sets Ukraine policy for the United States during the Trump administration, and not Donald Trump. You had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the top-ranking general in the United States, making a back-channel discussion with his counterpart in China, telling him that, don't worry, democracy is sometimes messy, I think is what he said. We have everything under control. We will not allow Trump to attack China. Everything will run through me. But if we have to attack, because the president is the commander in chief, if we have to attack, don't worry, I'm going to give you it won't be a surprise. I'll give you a warning. Basically saying he is going to sacrifice Americans. It was not going to come to this, of course, because Trump was not going to attack China. He was tough on China, but he wasn't going to nuke them or send a carrier group over there to invade. But look what happened here. The top general in the United States said, "I'm going to put, theoretically, American troops in danger. I'm going to get them killed," is what he said. I'm going to allow my troops to be killed. Just in case, we're not going to do what Trump said. Basically, the top general in the United States, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was part of the resistance.
Right.
And if this is the kind of stuff that happens in banana republics, that's a military junta at that point.
Right.
If it would have come to that. And so you have a man in the resistance at the head of your military. And why isn't he been fired by Joe Biden? Why hasn't he been forced to resign? Frankly, why isn't he under charges? Low-level military people who take a picture or a selfie in a nuclear sub get court-martialed. And the head of the guy who's talking to an adversary of the United States is telling him that I'll give you a warning if we attack. Nothing is happening to this man. This is unbelievable. But, I say that every podcast. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Everything seems believable now because Trump derangement syndrome is so real that it caused the top general of the United States to basically collude, there's a great word, collude with an adversary of the United States to stop Trump in his fantasy of Trump starting a war. And he is the only president in the lifetime of most people watching and listening to this podcast who did not start a war.
Yeah. That I was going to say that, despite everyone's concerns that, at the beginning of Trump's presidency, that he was just going to start bombing countries as soon as he took office, he ended up being the most anti-war president of my lifetime. So this sudden concern that he was just going to start World War III for no reason is just it's baffling to me. And we talk about Trump derangement syndrome all the time on this, but this is getting pathological. I think that we have to consider putting this in the DSM at some point. This runs deep. And then the other thing about the junta or whatever you called it, if you needed any proof that there's a deep state, if there's anyone that's denying that at this point, is there any better proof than this? That these, unelected, people in government are actually controlling stuff behind the scenes.
Well, I don't know if you need better proof, but it's certainly equal proof to all the other proof that existed the entire Trump presidency.
Right.
Before he was even inaugurated, the FBI was spying on him. And the deep state was undermining him at every single turn of his presidency. So yes, the deep state exists, and it even exists in our military. This is not just disgusting and frustrating and angering to anybody who supported Trump, but if you believe in a constitutional republic that we are supposed to live in, if you believe in the civilian control of the military, this is extremely troubling. And there have to be consequences for this. General Milley should be fired. He should have been fired 2 days ago. And he should be, just for Afghanistan, he should have been fired. That debacle. But there's no accountability for the deep state. Never has been. Not a single person who violated dozens of federal laws had one inkling or one. None of what he was charged, but they didn't even have any real professional ramifications for it at all. We are not. This is when these things continue to happen and there are no consequences. The deep state that is real will just continue to do this and do even more things. Why do you think Milley was so confident that he could get away with this? Because everybody's gotten away with it, from the head of the FBI to HHS to all the federal departments, and now to the top of our military chain. This is really, really troubling. This is not America anymore at that point. We are not a representative democracy. We are not a republic. We are a country that is ruled by a ruling elite that are completely unaccountable to the law and to the voters.
So I actually think that it's possible that he will be fired by this, and that he probably will be fired soon-ish, would be my guess. And I think that the reason that he's going to be fired, and I think the reason that this story came out, is because they're throwing him under the bus for Afghanistan. I think that that's what this is all about. The liberal media... They did
the same thing to Cuomo.
Yeah. Well, they do this kind of thing all the time. When you when you are in the midst of a scandal and you're getting bludgeoned, like Joe Biden has been getting bludgeoned politically because he just totally mishandled the way that they were getting out of Afghanistan. Not that we were getting out, but the way that we were getting out, because he mishandled that, and because Milley was one of the top figures involved in it. I refuse to believe that this scandal that breaks out about this same guy coming from a source that normally is very friendly to the establishment Democrats, that this is all just a coincidence. Like that this is just no freaking way. This is not a coincidence. This is them assassinating politically Milley, throwing him under the bus so that they can say, you know what, it was all his fault. You wait and see. They'll start laying all the blame on Milley for Afghanistan now too. It'll all come his way. He gets fired, and then anyone who asks a question about accountability, about Afghanistan, about all this stuff, they'll be able to say, yeah, it was that Milley guy. He was terrible. He was a total train wreck, and he's gone. We got rid of him. I could be wrong, but I refuse to believe that there are any coincidences when it comes to this kind of coordination between the media, the timing of all of this. I have a hard time believing that.
You know, I would concur with Justin, because I mean, look at what they did with Cuomo. You know, for a year and a half, they just sat on the fact that he killed anywhere between 6,000 to 15,000 elderly people in nursing homes in New York City. And then once finally, you know, there was a lot of heat and there was a lot of pressure, suddenly all of these sexual allegations come up. Now, don't get me wrong, I 100% believe the women who were accusing him, but those allegations had existed for years, and they chose to do nothing with those allegations for years, for decades even. So it just goes to show you that, like, when you're in the midst of a scandal, you just pick another scandal to draw attention to.
Yeah, I see one comment that says he'll retire for personal reasons. I actually think that he'll say, I don't want to be a distraction for all the more important things going on, so I'm going to step down. That's probably more likely his excuse. But so just kind of reading through some of the actual statements. So in the show notes, you can find this Washington Post article that talks all about this. But it says, in reference to the first call, and this happened before the election, it says, in the book's account, Milley went as far as to pledge he would alert his counterpart in the event of a U.S. attack, stressing the rapport they'd established through a back channel. Quote, General Lee, you and I have known each other for 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise.
I'm your friend. Trust me.
Because, you know, a surprise.
I'd never betray you, General Lee, please. This is so pathetic.
Our kids go to the same school.
Yeah.
So then, like, there's another part, and this call, the next one, took place January 8th. Milley essentially took control of the government. It says he called the admiral overseeing the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, the military unit responsible for Asia and Pacific region, and recommended postponing the military exercise, according to the book. The admiral complied. Milley also summoned senior officers to review the procedures for launching nuclear weapons, saying the president alone could give the order, but crucially that he, Milley, also had to be involved. Looking each in the eye, Milley asked the officers to affirm that they had understood, the author writes, in what he considered an oath. So it's like, again, we'll just cut the president out of the whole conversation here.
I mean, forget about, you know, treason. I think it's obviously treason from a common understanding of it. Legally, I don't think it is treason. You have to have all these special qualifications in order for it to be treason. You need like 2 witnesses, and there's all this stuff you need to have in order for it to qualify as treason.
I don't think literal wartime adversaries.
China is not officially an enemy of the United States of America, even though they're unofficially an enemy of the United States of America, and so all of that stuff. But how is this not? So, I mean, how is this not like the biggest scandal? It's essentially a coup.
Well, that's
I mean, I don't know. It's a halfway coup. It's not all the way there, but it's it's close.
He directly circumvented the authority of the president of the United States. I mean,
Right.
when you take the reins of the military and say, yeah, I know the president is supposed to be the one who controls the nuclear launch codes, but look me in the eye and let me know that you're going to talk to me first before you do anything rash. I mean,
how is that not a coup?
Right. It's at least prepping for one. Like, and I don't want like a frivolous nuclear war more than the next guy, but like this is just Trump derangement syndrome to the nth degree.
But see, can I just add to that? So the idea that China was looking at what was going on January 6th, and they were watching, these
unguided tour,
these pro-Trump and some QAnon crazies and whatever, like walk through the Capitol building and take selfies at Nancy Pelosi's desk. Like the idea that China looked at that and said, "Oh my God, they're going to attack at any moment," and it's like insane. Obviously, nobody believed that. No one. And so either Milley is the dumbest human being on the face of the planet, which is really saying something, or there's something else to this that I can't even begin to fathom. But I refuse to believe that a guy who gets to that level in the military is so stupid that he would think that the Chinese, watching this totally internal issue, and by the way, in China they have this every other week. They have this like every other week. They have what happened on January 6th. And you know what they do? They don't throw people in prison. They just they kill people. They execute people who don't do what they say. Yeah, they roll in the tanks and then they roll over the protesters. That's how it works. So the idea that the Chinese would look at that and say, that's like they're on the verge of total collapse makes no sense, because they don't collapse and it happens to them all the time. Nobody in China believed that America was on the verge of going to war with China. Nobody. No one believed that. And that talking point that he's using, I think, is probably just an excuse to shield whatever the real reason was for him doing these things. I don't know what that is, but I refuse to believe that that was the real reason. I refuse to believe it because it's just so stupid. Also, I'm very skeptical always when people like this put things into writing. In situations like that, right? Why the hell would you put that into writing unless you had some sort of alternative plan there? I mean, he's the highest level of the military. He knows that this is going to be brought up somehow, that people are going to find out about this in some fashion at some point in time. He had to have believed that. So why would he write it down? Why would he say it that way? It was almost like he was leaving a paper trail to later be able to go back and say, oh yeah, that Trump guy, we were on the verge of total collapse and I saved the world.
Right.
It's weird and I don't understand it, but
he thinks he's the hero. He thinks he's the hero.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If he really did buy hook, line, and sinker into Trump derangements syndrome, he probably thought that Trump was going to be arrested and stand trial, and that, like all of this was going to come out and he was going to be hailed as a hero for, like saving the day and making sure that, basically averting nuclear war with China. There's a strong possibility that he sincerely believed he was the protagonist in his own story.
Oh, of course.
Well, I have no doubt that's somewhat the case, but I refuse to believe that he really thought China. He may have thought that Trump was going to do something crazy or whatever, but did he really think that China was watching the January 6th stuff and thought, oh my God, we're about to go to war with America? I don't buy that.
He did believe that, because he has Trump derangement syndrome, like so much of our media and the left. Look, this is as close to a real insurrection and a coup as you can get without actually pulling it off. What happened on January 6th was terrible. It was not an insurrection and it was not a coup, but that's what our media and our ruling class called it and really believed it to be. The idea that grandma's, having it like Donnie, you said, an unauthorized tour of the Capitol Rotunda is some kind of insurrection, but this isn't. Look, one of the reasons January 6th happened was because of what Milley did, because half this country, or more than half the country, supported Donald Trump. Okay, let's just put it in half, because the popular vote was off. But half the country supports Donald Trump. They elected him president to fight against the deep state, to implement a constitutionalist agenda, to fight back. And they watched the deep state try to crush Trump every single day with every tool they had at their disposal. And that frustration of watching that happen for 4 years is some of the motivation for why people showed up at the Capitol on January 6th, because they thought the election was fishy too. They thought this was all part of a conspiracy to stop Trump and breaking laws, using every tool they had at their disposal to stop him. It's hard to say that that's a conspiracy theory when you find out that General Milley was on the phone with his general counterpart in China twice, once before the election and once on January. So the first phone call was October 30th. So what if Trump was reelected? What was Milley going to do then? Was he actually going to spend the entire second term of the Trump administration on the phone with China, assuring them that no matter what happens, we're going to stop Trump from doing anything aggressive against you? Are we going to stop? This is the idea, the concept in the United States of civilian control of the military is what protects us from being one of those banana republics in which the strongest general with the most troops gets to be the head of the country.
Right.
If not for civilian control of the military, we probably would not be the United States of America today, because the Civil War, if the Union generals had their druthers, would probably have just told the South to they could just go, let them go. But Abraham Lincoln wanted to keep the Union together and kept firing generals until he found the right one that would win the war for him in Ulysses S. Grant. If you do not hold sacrosanct, absolutely sacrosanct, almost holy, the idea that the commander-in-chief is the elected president of the United States, and he has the authority, the final say, and frankly, every say on the use of military force, you are no longer the United States of America. You're not close to it. You're something akin to, the totalitarian countries that you've seen rise and fall throughout history.
All right.
Well, the president doesn't have every say in the military.
But he is the commander-in-chief, and Milley is not his boss. It's the other way around.
That's true.
Fair enough.
So the Rand Paul released a statement saying that if this was true, now all of this was in a book, right? I think some of it's been confirmed by himself, saying trying to put it in context or whatever. But Rand Paul released a statement shortly after these revelations came out and said that if this is true, Milley needs to be court-martialed. Somebody on this already said, maybe you, Justin, said that you think that he'll resign. Do you think that that's going to happen? Do you think that's what it's just going to be? Do you think he'll be court-martialed? Apparently, he's going to be testifying in front of the Senate. It was originally supposed to be because of Afghanistan and all that stuff, but surely this is going to be the topic at hand. So what's going to happen? Anyone take a swing at it?
I don't think it's. I have no idea. I have no idea. I know that in Congress he's going to get obliterated politically, and I think that will force him to resign if he doesn't resign before then. So I do think he's either going to resign or he's going to be fired. As far as being court-martial go, to be honest, I don't know enough about the military legal system, which is different than the civilian legal system, about whether you can just resign and then all of a sudden it doesn't count. I'm pretty sure they can still drag you in front of that, and because you were a military officer while this was all going on, so I don't know that resigning gets you out of that, but it might. I don't know. So I mean, I think that at the end of the day, the biggest thing that's going to happen from a public relations standpoint is he's going to go in front of Congress. He's going to look absolutely horrible. He's either going to resign or get fired. And then they're going to lay all the blame on him for Afghanistan, and then that's going to be the end of that. Joe Biden's going to try to move on.
He must be working overtime right now, reassuring every country in the entire world that Joe Biden isn't going to wake up in the morning in a daze and want to just bomb countries. All these other countries are watching Joe Biden fumble through speeches and fall up the stairs, and they're like, "Oh crap, he might nuke us."
No, see, that's the ironic part. I don't think he's doing any of that. I think they were so terrified of Trump that they mischaracterized him as, a loose cannon who, just has a trigger finger on the nuke thing. But then you have Biden, who it's pretty safe to say he has some early stages of dementia, if not something else.
Yeah, no doubt.
He very well may wake up one day, not realize where he is, not realize who he is, and may order something drastic,
right.
Just look at
we need to attack the Ottoman Empire.
What, right? Or look at the missile strike in Afghanistan, where they claimed it was an ISIS operative. Turns out it was an aid worker and his kids.
Oh yeah, I know.
They had no idea.
All right, we got to
Yeah,
move on. We
good
got to get
point.
to other topics here.
Just what's going to happen to Milley? Nothing.
I
He either
agree.
resigns by his own accord, or nothing will
Well,
happen
that's
to
not
him.
nothing.
Biden's not going
I mean,
to fire
If he
him.
resigns, then that's something.
No, but no outside force is going to.
Well, if he
exert itself on
resigns,
his
what
career.
outside force could do something to his career? He just resigned. That's the whole point.
I lost
He's not
all
gonna be held
hope that
accountable.
anybody would be held accountable when it came out that Fauci absolutely lied
Right.
before Congress under
Yes.
oath, and he is still running the show.
I think
So
what people
anybody who's living under the farce that we still live in a free country where unelected, never mind elected politicians, but unelected bureaucrats are going to be held accountable for the actual laws of the land. No,
Yeah,
we live in a banana republic.
The first rule of deep state is don't talk about deep state. The second rule of deep state is nobody in the deep state gets in trouble.
This is that the deep state is the one that released this information. So this doesn't make any sense. Yes, of course it is, Jim.
It was
Yes, of course.
reporters. It was
No, it was not reporters. The reporters were given the information.
It's from Bob Woodward's book.
Right, who is part of the establishment if there ever was a guy. And you would say that if we were talking about Donald Trump. In fact, you probably did say that when we were talking about Donald Trump and there were scandals that Bob Woodward was reporting about him. So the idea that this is this is a political assassination. That's what this is. They're killing his career right now. This is a Joe Biden plan. I almost can guarantee that's what this is.
Do you know who the number one? You know who is absolutely certain who is the source for Bob Woodward on the Milley stuff? Milley.
Right.
I guarantee you, he told Woodward that himself because he thought it would make him look good. He thinks he's the hero.
It's about the
He's
timing
the baddie,
of it,
but
Jim.
he thinks he's the
It's
hero.
about the timing of it. You think it's a coincidence that this happened right after Afghanistan?
I'm glad
I
it
don't think
did.
so. No way. There's no such thing as coincidences when it comes to stuff like this.
All right.
All right, we're gonna blaze through this next part because it's as it often does. News broke shortly after we recorded last Thursday. Biden read a speech about his administration's plan to continue the fight against COVID-19, and amongst the policies that he announced, he dictated that all businesses in the United States with over 100 employees, 100 or more employees, would have to mandate that their employees be vaccinated or require them get a weekly COVID test. Any health facilities that take Medicaid or Medicare money, they also have to get, vaccinated. Federal workers have to get vaccinated. Failure to comply would result in massive fines. I think it's like $12,000, $14,000, something like that per violation. The Biden administration used the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, to justify the rule. And in terms of the news cycle, this story is super old already. Like I said, it's a week old. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time hashing out the details of this, but it seems like a pretty important thing that we can't just ignore. So I'll open it up to whoever wants to jump in first. What do you think? Step too far? Just the right amount of tyranny to finally crush this virus into submission? What do you think?
Might as well just block this out for Jim. I have a feeling
No,
he
no,
has
no.
a.
So, well,
Yeah, we need Jim Rant A1. 1A. Go ahead.
well, if Jim's gonna pass, then what?
Oh, I'm not gonna. I'll get in later. Go ahead.
My argument on this is that this is an overtly unconstitutional action, and that I'm actually a little disappointed that more conservatives are not taking that particular view as the starting point. I don't really even think we need to talk about vaccines or vaccine mandates in general or anything like that. If it is illegal, then the rest of it doesn't really matter whether it's justified or not justified or whatever. And I don't think that you should have a national vaccine mandate, but regardless of whether it was legal or not. But I think it's obviously illegal. There is literally nothing in the Constitution which would indicate that the federal government, never mind the President of the United States, but the federal government in any capacity has the right to regulate workplace public health issues. There's nothing that would indicate that. Perhaps an interstate commerce issue, maybe you could make an argument for that. But if you're talking about an actual workplace, you could have a workplace with 100 employees. They all work in one state. How is that possibly a federal issue? Under what part of the Constitution does the president have any authority to do that? It's not listed anywhere in the Constitution. And the 10th Amendment, which nobody wants to ever talk about or reference, but the 10th Amendment very clearly, very plainly states for a very specific reason that those things, those powers and authorities not expressly given to the federal government by the Constitution are reserved to the states or to the people. That's where it belongs. This is a state issue. And there's all these people out there saying, well, what about, Jacobson v. Massachusetts? This is a Supreme Court case from 1905. A lot of things have happened since 1905 in the Supreme Court, by the way. But it's a Supreme Court case from 1905 that says vaccine mandates in certain circumstances are okay. But the key issue is that Supreme Court case is dealing with a state law that allowed local governments to impose vaccine mandates. It has nothing to do with the federal government imposing a vaccine mandate. Nothing at all. All that case can be used for is to say that over 100 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that states have the authority to allow local governments to have vaccine mandates, or states could impose a vaccine mandate. That is the best, that's the broadest interpretation you can have from that court case. There are no other court cases about national vaccine mandates because there's never been a national vaccine mandate of any other kind. And so I can't even begin to understand where people are coming up with this idea that Biden has the authority to do this. They're pointing to OSHA, which is a law from 1970, that's 50 years ago, saying that he has authority under that. That's a federal statute that is subordinate to the Constitution. So you have to have the constitutional authority to interpret OSHA in that broad way, and they don't have that. So again, where is there, show me the part of the Constitution that says the federal government can regulate health, public health decisions. Show me where that is.
I bet
can't
they'll
give
try
you
to
an
use
example.
the general welfare clause.
You could, they might, but there's two problems with that. The first is the general welfare clause is specifically tied to taxing and spending money. So the idea is you spend money for the general welfare, right? This has nothing to do with spending money. This is about imposing regulations. The second issue is the same people who are in support of this would argue, and I'm not taking a position on abortion one way or another, but they would argue that the Constitution says that there is a constitutional right for people under a privacy right that does not actually exist in the Constitution to make a healthcare decision about abortion. That's what they would argue. So I'm having a hard time understanding if you take that view, again, regardless of what you believe about abortion, if you take that view, I'm having a hard time understanding how you can have a constitutional privacy right to get an abortion whenever you want, or at least after a certain period of time, or before a certain period of time, but you don't have a constitutional right to say that someone can't coerce you to pump a chemical into your body. I don't understand that. So I have a privacy right to get an abortion up to a certain number of weeks, but I don't have a privacy right to avoid having an employer impose a vaccine mandate on me. I can't even begin to understand the logic of this. And I actually believe, I've come to believe, I was a little bit skeptical a few days ago, but I've come to believe that I don't think this will ever actually become law. I think that the courts you're going to have a court immediately say, nope, we're going to put this on pause until it works through the court system. You will get an appellate court somewhere federally that says it's unconstitutional. It will eventually go to the Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court, God willing, will actually say, yes, this is totally unconstitutional. There is no justification in the Constitution for the federal government to do this, and will strike the whole thing down. And I think Biden may very well actually know that, and that this is all part of a plan to sort of shift the focus away from Afghanistan. Again, because remember, like 10 months ago, Joe Biden was saying, I wasn't going to impose a vaccine mandate. So now all of a sudden he's saying he is. Well, why? What has changed? That's where I think, but the core issue is it's unconstitutional. And I think we need to start there, and then you can work your way down from that point in time.
Yeah, I completely agree, Justin. I've had a lot of fun over the past couple of weeks watching the crowd that usually chants "My body, my choice," trying to rationalize robbing people of their livelihoods if they don't want to take an experimental vaccine. Not trying to, put any kind of opinion on whether or not the vaccine is or is not safe. But just to watch the same people who, for instance, in Texas, are standing on the courthouse steps, chanting and waving signs that say "My body, my choice," or at the same time, out of the other side of their mouth, they're going to say, "You either take the jab or you lose the job that you've had for 20 years, or you can't support your family, or you can't participate in normal society." I mean, it's mental gymnastics.
Here's a newsflash for everybody: you do not have a right to not be exposed to an infectious disease.
Exactly.
If that's the case, then flu kills a lot of people, especially the old, and it's also troublesome for the young. And the young are not at any danger really of death for sure from COVID. Yet by this OSHA mandate, you should have to wear masks everywhere you go, just in case somebody might get the flu from you, and not just during flu season. It could happen anytime. But yeah, there is actually not a constitutional right not to be exposed to danger. Be it an infectious disease or anything else. And look, this is, I think we talked about the deep state earlier, and I'm glad Justin got to go first and go on so long so I could calm down from our first segment. But this is the tyranny of the deep state in a different way. This is a rule or regulation by OSHA. Now, normally when OSHA issues a rule, it takes quite a while. It takes a long time. They have to propose the rule. There has to be public comment for the rule. Then there has to be, there's a long drawn out approval process for a reason. Is to determine whether this rule makes sense. And OSHA, again, its mandate is to make sure, like, say, a worker in a factory doesn't get his arm ripped off from the machinery he's using because the employer is trying to cut corners and putting their physical safety at immediate and obvious risk. OSHA is not. Its mandate is not to make sure that everybody, in the workplace either has a vaccine or doesn't have a disease or masks themselves or stays farther apart. Especially again, considering the 99.9% of people who get this disease are going to survive it, just like they survive flu. The vast majority of people who die from this disease are either obese or elderly or both. So if they're elderly, they're not in the workplace. And we've basically at base have lost the ability to make choices about our own lives and our own bodies. As you guys said, I don't want to hear my body, my choice from a leftist ever again, because it is the left that is pushing these vaccine mandates and these lockdowns and all of this stuff. It's like, if you believe in my body, my choice, then allow me to make my choice for my body. And it is unconstitutional. It is certainly wrong to threaten people's livelihoods if they don't get what is, again, an experimental vaccine. I said this a year ago, when talk of vaccines was coming, and then they laid out the only reason we're going to get these vaccines fast is because we're going to hold the producers of these vaccines harmless if anything harmful comes from the vaccine. If I was able to sue Pfizer or Moderna, if I had a negative reaction or died or had my spouse or relative die from the vaccine, if there was an ability to hold them legally liable for the harm that these vaccines produce, hey, that's a completely different story. But people are now being forced to take a vaccine in which they really have no recourse at all if they have a negative effect to this vaccine, or even if they die. Too bad. Get you and being forced to do this is completely wrong. And I hope there are lawsuits that are coming soon to stop this bullshit stuff.
I think that I could be wrong, but I think that there's, I think it was Arizona. There's at least one state that has already either filed suit or they said they're going to file suit about this. There's no doubt that there's going to be people who are going to file suit over this. Is definitely going to go to court. I did want to add one thing. You mentioned about OSHA, and you talked about how OSHA is supposed to regulate workplace safety, and all of this stuff doesn't fall within that. The actual way that the OSHA law is written is so broad that you could theoretically interpret it to mean almost anything. It's ridiculously broadly worded. Yeah. But I would argue that OSHA, just in and of itself, unless we're talking about interstate commerce, is also unconstitutional. Because where in the Constitution does it say that the federal government should be regulating whether or not your whatever, your workplace safety equipment that you're using in your warehouse is up to code or not. That's not a federal issue either. That's also a state issue. So
Yeah, well, you're very right. There are a lot of people that are already challenging this. Like you said, some states that are saying that they're not going to comply. Some businesses that said that they're not going to comply. I think like Ben Shapiro's group said, I'm not doing this. So this is definitely going to work its way up in the courts, and I'll be interested to see what happens. But I'm actually kind of surprised by the amount of outrage of this. Obviously, you've got people on the right side of the aisle that are expectedly outraged by a mandate like this. But I was actually kind of surprised to see how across the board some of this anger was. You wouldn't be able to tell from like Twitter, but just kind of Googling around, I found this video, and Andy, you can play it. Go ahead. Of a teachers' protest in New York City, where it was teachers and healthcare workers protesting against this mandate. So you can just play a little bit of it. I don't even think we need the sound or anything like that. But so, like I said, it's kind of expected from certain parts of the population, but others, you would expect them to fall in line. And as you can see from some of these videos, doesn't seem like they're falling in line. So I'm wondering if this is going to be like the moment that people start waking up and rejecting these government dictates. I'm not entirely sure.
Has the vaccine passport mandate gotten into effect in New York City yet?
I think so. I think it went in a little while ago. Yeah.
Well, I knew that they had announced it in August, but I thought it went into. There
was multiple levels of it.
Yeah. I thought everybody had to like.
Oh, maybe it's full effect tomorrow. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was full effect by like September 17th.
But I want to jump into Australia. So Australia is like, if you've just seen headlines, you know that it's like the most authoritarian when it comes to dealing with COVID. So I found this article from the Federalist, which again, everything that I talk about is linked in the show notes. And this outlines it beyond what I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad. So I'm just going to read some of this stuff. So before March 2020, Australia was often celebrated as a role model for liberal democracy, with free elections, a free press, an independent judiciary, a functional political system, and a market-based economy. Its citizens enjoyed a wide range of political rights, including freedom of speech and assembly. Then COVID-19 swept through the world like wildfire. To contain the infection, the Australian federal and state governments imposed tyrannical restrictions on their citizens. Australia's borders have been closed since March 2020. Australian citizens inside the country are not allowed to leave. Most of those stranded abroad and foreign visitors are not permitted to come back unless the government approves. The once free and open Australian continent has effectively become a giant prison for its 26 million residents. So,
isn't that ironic?
It says state governments have sealed their borders, trapping children away from their parents in some cases. There was one story in there saying that a boy was staying with grandparents in a different state, not allowed to go home to parents until public outcry forced the government to stand down. There's been lockdowns, sometimes because of a single case. Melbourne, the second largest city in Australia, is currently experiencing its sixth lockdown. Sydney residents have experienced 114 days of lockdown. Lockdowns are enforced by soldiers. There's travel limits. In Victoria, residents are only allowed to leave their homes within a 3-mile radius to buy food, provide care, exercise, attend work. There's curfews in place. In Victoria, curfew at 9 p.m. Arresting for making Facebook posts calling for peaceful anti-lockdown protests that literally happened because it was deemed a public health risk. South Australia quarantine app that uses geolocation and facial recognition software to ensure that you're obeying the stay-at-home orders.
That's mandatory, by the way. It's not an option. You have to download it.
The app allows government officials to randomly contact people and ask them to provide proof of their location within 15 minutes. Those that do not comply within that time frame will probably get a visit from the police and be fined upwards of $1,000. So this is all part of Australia's COVID-0 policy, which intends to enforce these measures until the country experiences 14 consecutive days with no new cases. Not deaths, no new cases.
Not 13 out of 15. That's not good enough.
No.
It's got to be 14 consecutive days.
Yeah. Yes.
14 consecutive days is scientific proof that means you're in the clear and that it won't ever come back again.
So a counter to the last point that I made when we were talking about the United States, with like the teachers in New York protesting over this. The worst part about all of this is that the polls in Australia show that the majority of Australians support these government policies. Is that like the most depressing thing that you've heard all day?
It's depressing, and it's probably that way in the United States too.
I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't. Maybe not a majority, but a large minority. I think I saw a poll the other day where it said that I think 45% or something of Americans believe that vaccine mandates are okay. That you should be able to force other Americans to take the COVID-19 vaccine.
Hey,
and again,
it's not a majority.
Well, not yet.
Well, yeah, but there's
doing
probably
a great job
like
of brainwashing all of us.
15% undecided or some stupid thing.
That's
like
right,
that.
right. Now, again, this OSHA thing this is all under emergency powers, and let's be clear, we're not under an emergency anymore. The number of cases and deaths is so far below it was at the peak when it actually, you could argue, was an emergency. And this is just, again, the deep state and our rulers. These are not our representatives in government. These are our rulers. This is the ruling class. And they have determined that it's going to be an emergency for as long as they feel like exerting their control and power over you.
Yeah,
and it's worse in Australia than it is in the United States, but not that much worse, because Fauci was just on CNN last week or this week saying that we're going to have to look into the idea of showing proof of vaccination before you can travel on an airplane or a train in this country.
Now, look, sorry, go ahead, Donnie.
Well, let me wrap up all of this, and I'll open up to comments because I'm just trying to cruise through a lot of information here. But of course, this stuff has real life consequences, right? I always say that people generally, and liberals specifically, have a tendency to only look at one side of the ledger, right? Everything's like, well, if it only saves one life, while ignoring all of the other lives that are ruined by the policies that they advocate for. So, depression rates, suicide rates, closed businesses,
drug overdoses,
GDP plummeting, the psychological toll that it's taking on people, the social and emotional development of children, all being ignored, because of there's one case that happened in Sydney over the, 14-day period or something like that, right? So there was a piece that I have again in the show notes from the BBC that kind of talks about the number of lives that have been upended by Australia's sealed border. And frankly, it's disgusting, right? But, do the ends justify the means? Yeah, we're all suffering through this COVID-0 restrictions, but at least that means that we've defeated COVID, right? Wrong. So according to this New York Times article, again in the show notes, despite more than half of Australia's 25 million inhabitants living under very harsh restrictions, that's their words, not mine, including overnight curfews, travel limits, all of the things that we have talked about, cases have soared to more than 1,400 a day, the most since the pandemic began. As authorities tighten restrictions, hospitals are reaching capacity with COVID-19 patients. Australia's delayed vaccination program is only beginning to gain momentum. So if you look at the chart for Australia, the current spike that they're experiencing right now is far larger than any other during the pandemic in that country so far.
It's almost like if you lock people inside of artificial rooms with a virus that primarily spreads in artificial settings, we might get higher case numbers. I mean,
the curfew thing is so you're limiting the window at which people can actually go out and interact in the world.
Right.
It's like, isn't that so counter?
We're actually going to limit how much sun you're allowed to have.
It's just like, spread out. Oh, you can go to the grocery store at 10 while everyone else is going at 9. Go at 10. Nope, curfew. It's all ridiculous.
Yeah, I think the most important part of this is not that they are authoritarian. I think that there's no doubt that if we had fewer constitutional protections here in the United States, there's no doubt that we would have the same kind of thing happening, at least in certain parts of the country. If California could just do whatever it wanted without fear of being, sued in federal court, I think that they would do stuff like this. I think it would do even more than it's already done. And you saw what happened with Gavin Newsom. He got recalled. They had enough signatures to have a recall election. He overwhelmingly won. It was like 64% of the vote, 64% of the vote. So California overwhelmingly chose to go with the guy who was not only a tyrant, but a COVID tyrant, but a COVID hypocrite while he was a tyrant. And they were totally fine with it. They would rather have that than have anybody else, because they could have chosen one of 50 other people who had run, 50 something, it was more than 50, and instead they chose, including another Democrat, but instead they chose to keep him. So it just goes to show you, as Jim referenced earlier, there actually is a sizable number of people. It might even be a majority of voters, or it might be a majority of people, all people, who just are okay with these authoritarian restrictions, so long as you can make an argument that the threat is great enough, the restrictions should be imposed. I think that's what these people believe. And so really, in a lot of ways, this all comes down to, is the threat big enough? And that question is almost always determined by whatever the media tells these people.
Right.
If the media can convince you that it's a big enough threat, it's a big enough threat. It doesn't matter if in actuality it is. We have no objective standard for measuring what is a crisis and what isn't a crisis. It's a subjective determination that is first made by the media, usually to accomplish some sort of political goal, and then they filter that down into the population, and the population doesn't always go along with it. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And if it's believable enough in their minds, they will go along with it. And so in a lot of ways, we always seem to circle back to the media being a huge part of the problem, which I know is kind of a broken record thing, but it is one of the biggest problems with this country. It really is. It's more important maybe than almost anything else, because it drives the narrative of almost every policy issue today.
Well, and to your point, Justin, about us not really having a firm grasp on what a crisis is, I think this is something that I've been saying for a long time. I think people in the Western world have become far too comfortable with the lives that they lead. We exist, in a beautiful first world country where, we're pretty much padded from all of the normal dangers and potential risks that most humans experience throughout history. And so, and to top that off, we have this media who spoon feeds us, fear porn essentially every day. And so when something even mildly threatening comes along, there's a huge portion of the population in countries like Australia, the UK, Canada, the United States that are more than willing. They're biting at the bit to hand over their liberties and their freedom for not even security, but the illusion of security.
Yeah.
The illusion of comfort.
That's such a great point, Nate. And I know we have to go on to another topic.
I want to hit that last topic just for a few minutes. So
it'll take me just 1 second to say this. And that is, while we are emphasizing, I live here in Illinois, and while it's really easy to be frustrated about the lockdowns and the restrictions and the rules that are in place that restrict our movement and liberty and able to live our lives, the college football season started a couple of weeks ago. Down south, especially in SEC country, stadiums filled with 80,000 people, almost nobody wearing a mask. If you live in Tennessee or Florida, you basically live not that much different than you did before COVID ever happened. And there are other states in this country, Texas among them, where people are not really under a COVID tyranny like you can be in a blue state. And I think I've been waiting for a year for the American people to just basically rise up together and say, enough, we're not doing this anymore. But instead, the great, laboratory of democracy that is the United States, you have states doing this. And I think maybe soon, I hope that there'll be enough momentum that Anthony Fauci will just fade away, that these states will just quietly announce that there's no more restrictions anymore, and everyone will forget it ever happened.
This is why the national vaccine mandate type stuff is so important, because they are seeing that. And in that speech that Joe Biden announced the vaccine mandate, he specifically threatened governors who were not going along with his agenda. So
he's going to get them out of the way.
He's going to get them out of the way. So whatever the hell that means. So it's all part of this same idea.
I think it's important to bring up, Australia as a cautionary tale. Like, this is the ghost of Christmas future. If we keep going down this path, like, that's what we're going to be subjected to. So yeah, take a good look at some of those some of those clips and stuff that are being shared on social media about Australia and
Started
just,
off as a penal colony, ends as a penal colony.
right. Wonder if that's what you want imposed here in the United States. Also, looking at the ghost of Christmas future, I want to talk about Europe for the last 5 minutes of this and their self-inflicted energy crisis that's going on. So they got a couple of Wall Street Journal articles. One, energy prices in Europe hit records after wind stops blowing. It says natural gas and electricity markets are already surging in Europe when a fresh catalyst emerged. The wind in the stormy North Sea stopped blowing. The sudden slowdown in wind-driven electricity production off the coast of the UK in recent weeks whipsawed. I haven't heard that word before. Whipsawed through the regional energy markets. Gas and coal-fired electricity plants were called in to make up for the shortfall from wind. This other one, same Wall Street Journal, Europe's Climate Lesson for America, says energy prices are soaring in Europe and the effects are rippling across the Atlantic. Blame anti-carbon policies of the kind that the Biden administration wants to impose on the United States. It says electricity prices in the UK this week jumped to a record $490 per megawatt hour, a 700% increase from the 2010 to 2020 average. Germany's electricity benchmark has doubled this year. Last month's 12.3% increase was the largest since 1974 and contributed to the highest inflation reading since 1993. Other economies are experiencing similar spikes. So it just kind of goes through this whole problem, the skyrocketing energy prices and just the ripples that has through manufacturing and all of that. And then the rippling effects that it has in foreign policy. So it says that adversaries are exploiting the situation. Russia has exploited the chaos by slowing gas deliveries to increase pressure on Germany to finish the Nord Stream 2 pipeline certification. Mr. Putin can now throw his weight around in Europe because the rest of the world needs his gas. So it just kind of goes on and on and on. But the whole point, the thing that's the genesis of all of this are these terrible energy policies that we rail against week in and week out on this podcast. But Jim, it's kind of, I don't want to say to take pleasure from seeing this, but it's like, it's finally, we could be like, yep, there's the outcome that we've been warning against. And that's the same outcome that we can come to expect here in America if we continue down this path. What do you think?
Yeah, it's 100% predictable. We've talked about this for years on this podcast. In fact, Germany decided to go heavy on wind, and its energy prices skyrocketed, and that was about a decade ago. And there's a reason why fossil fuels have been fueling the Western world or the world since the Industrial Revolution. It's because it's reliable, it's cheap. And as we get increasingly electrified and rely upon having all the time power, you can't go back in time. You cannot pretend. And that's what I like about stories like this, is that it bursts the bubble that, you can't just pretend that we can just rely on solar and wind and have a modern, reliable electricity grid. It is impossible. It is physically impossible for that to happen. And, like I said, I love when these stories show up because it's a smack in the face of reality.
Justin or Nate, you want to jump in with any comments on this?
Justin?
Oh, well.
I think everything that Jim said is spot on. I mean, we've been talking about this forever. The thing that's most frustrating about it is that it doesn't seem to matter to a lot of these policymakers.
Right.
That no matter how many times people talk about it, no matter how many papers come out saying it, no matter how many studies from industry that come out that say this won't work, it doesn't seem to matter to them. They don't care. It's almost as though it isn't really about the energy. It's almost that's the real reason. Maybe that is the reason. I don't know. So I think that's the issue here, right? I mean, Joe Bast used to famously say, former president of the Heartland Institute, helped, obviously build it into what it is today, used to say that climate change was the justification that the left to do all the things the left always wanted to do. They always wanted to do all these things. It wasn't like climate change started and then all of a sudden these plans to rework society started coming out of the woodwork. They always had those plans. Yep. Climate change just became a really convenient justification for it.
If you want the perfect example of that two-facedness, is Joe Biden helping to approve that pipeline from Russia to Germany to pump oil, from Russia into the mainland Europe, while at the same time, essentially shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. Right. That should just show you that this has absolutely nothing to do with climate change or energy production. It has everything to do with political grandstanding.
Yep, it says Americans are also feeling the pain here of the rise of energy prices. Electricity and utility gas prices were up 5.2% and 21.1% respectively over the past 12 months in August. Higher energy costs are bleeding into inflation. Some analysis predict that gas prices could double this winter if U.S. production doesn't increase and global demand remains high. So this is the bed that's being made for us by these, leftist policies, these climate change alarmist policies, and you can learn all about them and, the truth about climate change and all that if you attend the 14th International Conference on Climate Change that is occurring in Vegas on October 15th through the 17th. I think I've got that right, Jim. You can nod if I am. He's nodding. Right. So if you want to check out more information, get some more details on that, maybe register to attend that conference, you can go to heartland.org and there'll be a little button that you can click on, or you can go to climateconference.heartland.org. Jim, any other places that people should go for information about that very important conference?
Nope, those are the two places, but you should also visit climaterealism.com and climateataglance.com, where you can, really get your hands on the science and the analysis that puts a lie to the need to get off of fossil fuels and to basically destroy society through withholding reliable energy.
All right, that's going to do it. We are out of time for this week's episode of In the Tank podcast. Thank you all for joining us. If you are watching the show, fantastic. Make sure you leave comments, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You like it. That all of that stuff helps us break through the algorithm that makes sure that people don't see our content. So you could really help by doing that. If you're listening only, you're probably listening on Friday. You could join us on Thursday for the live show by watching us on YouTube or through one of these Facebook accounts. And if you want to send your comments, suggestions, or questions to the show, feel free to email us at inthethinkpodcast@gmail.com. Jim Lakely, where can the fine people find you?
At J Lakely on Socialist Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Socialist Twitter, and always go to heartland.org.
Justin Haskins, same question.
At Justin T. Haskins on just about everything. Also, happy birthday to Jim. It's not his birthday today, but it was his birthday.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, sir. So happy birthday,
belated
Jim.
birthday, Jim.
Happy big 7-0. Congrats, buddy.
Yep, I look great for 70, don't I?
You do.
And Nate Myers, you're our ghost on social media, so just join me in saying goodbye to the fine people.
Goodbye.
All right, have fun, everyone. We'll talk to you next week.